do I remember haircuts? Getting a haircut. Yeah, I remember. It was. Sorry, I've had a bit of it. I've had a day of it. Somebody earlier. Someone stole my cup. I was getting water and as I was getting the water, they grabbed it, and I would have taken it, but then they threw it to a friend, and that friend threw it to their friend, and they ran in different directions. There was no chance. And now I don't have a cup. You got two. Really? Thank you. Good night. I'll give it back. All right. What was the question? Haircuts. Yeah, because before the event, you had people cut your hair for you. You know, you didn't have to set fire to it like now. There were people you would pay, and it was their job to cut your hair. And there were different types of places though. There were cheaper ones, there were barbershops, and then there were hairdressers, salons, expensive. The barbershop was more basic, but that was fine. It was about 10, 12, but it was only for men. It was weird because only men were allowed in the barbershop, and no one really kicked up a fuss about it either. But women weren't allowed in the barbershop because they had to go to the more expensive one. They had to go to the more expensive one. Presumably, the best I can think of is because they generally had longer hair. Even though they'd be getting the same amount of hair cut off or less than the guy in the barbershop, they had to pay, and not just more, not like £2 more, not even double. They had to, like 10 times more. I'm not joking. Like if the barbershop was, I think it was about 10 or £10, £12, 100 for the good places. And the good places were only good because they basically got a sign, and they dressed the place up. 120 pounds. I mean, my wife, Samantha, she earned more than me. She always earned more than me, and she could afford to treat herself, and she did treat herself to it. It was a good hairdresser. But I remember she'd get home and she would look great. She would look great, and I would say, "Oh, I like your hair." But she wouldn't look happy. She'd go, "Thank you," but she wouldn't look happy. And I never asked, but I knew it was because she was having the remorse of what she'd just spent. And I never ever asked, "Oh, how much was that then?" But I could tell it was like, well, that's our weekend to Lisbon off, because it had gone at the hairdressers. And so I could never afford. I only ever went to the barber, and they were basically, there were signs on the street. There was there was a pole, a spinning white and red pole, and that meant cheap haircut. That was basically code. It was code, cheap haircut here. And you could tell, because if you went up to one of these places, I went to a place called Gigi's, Italian guys, about 70. And in the window would be examples of the haircut you could get. Now, this was misleading, but because you could only basically get one haircut. But the examples in the window were like haircuts you would never have, like they were from 30 years ago. And then you'd go in, ding dong, take a seat, and then he'd sort of wrapped you in a cloak. Why did he? Oh, so hair didn't get on you, presumably. And then he'd say, right, what are we doing today? What are we doing today? And he'd say that every time, but it didn't matter what you said. But the thing about him and all barbers is they all had terrible haircut. like just big. So when they said, what are we having today? You would just say, well, not that. You know what I mean? The opposite of you, basically. You wouldn't, because then you'd think, you don't mess up someone who's about to cut your hair. You'd cut your hair, and you'd be sat there looking, they do small talk as well. It was just boring. Like, what, going anywhere nice this weekend? And you think, well, not Lisbon. And there was a blue jar. You would sit, trying not to look at yourself in the mirror, because Gigi's doing his business, and you'd look at this blue jar, and it was with all combs and blades in it, and it was called Barbicide. Barbicide sounds like the mass execution of barbers, but Barbicide, and which wouldn't have been a bad idea given that, and it looked delicious. It was weird because it was full of dirty combs, but you just thought, ooh, I'd like to. On a hot day, you'd think, oh, I'd have some of that Barbicide. Anyway, he'd finish and put a mirror and show you the back of your head, and you'd basically shaving it all off, despite saying, oh, leave it at the back, you'd shaving it. And you'd go, oh, great, thanks. And you'd leave, and you'd walk down the street with a hat on, basically, and you'd be thinking, that is the last time. That is it. That's the last time I ever darken his door. 2-3 weeks later, ding dong, take a seat. It just repeated itself. Self-sacrifice it was. Self-mutilation it was. The barber shops. Some of them even, there were more expensive ones. They weren't all cheap. It became a thing that barbershops became more fashionable with younger people. And they offered... It was weird because they became fashionable with younger people, but offered things that were basically from the 19th century. So they'd offer hot shaves. Before people shaved at home, they'd go and have someone shave them. And then even though now you could get razors, people would go and pay to get their hair cut, and they would do it with their beard cut. And that never made sense, because you would be lying there with a stranger and he would have a knife to your throat. I never had it done. You used to pay to have a knife to your throat. I had a knife to my throat this morning because someone wanted my shoes. People used to pay for that. Luckily, she only got away with one of them, but you've got a cup.